I never thought I'd have a neighbor who could turn something as simple as a driveway into a war zone. But then again, I never imagined I'd end up living next to someone like Karen. She wasn't just any neighbor. She was the self-appointed queen of the HOA, a woman armed with a clipboard, a loud voice, and an inflated sense of authority. From the day I moved in, she made it her mission to monitor everything I did. If my grass grew half an inch too tall, I'd hear about it. If my trash cans were left out for an extra hour, she'd be at my door. But the real trouble began with the driveway, because while I respected boundaries, Karen didn't. She treated my property line as though it were optional, and for weeks, she thought nothing of blocking my driveway whenever it suited her. At first, I let it slide. She'd park her SUV partly across my driveway, just for a minute, while unloading groceries or while chatting with her friends. But those minutes often stretched into hours, and there were times when I came home after a long shift only to find her car, making it impossible for me to pull in. I'd honk, wait, and eventually, she'd come strolling out with a fake smile, pretending like it was some innocent mistake. "Oh, sorry about that. I'll move it right away." But I could see in her eyes that it wasn't a mistake. She was testing me, pushing boundaries, and daring me to push back. I tried to handle it like an adult. I knocked on her door one afternoon and calmly explained that her parking habits were creating problems for me. I told her that while I understood occasional slip-ups, it wasn't acceptable for her to keep blocking my driveway. Karen crossed her arms, smirked, and said, "Well, maybe you should learn to be more neighborly. It's not like I'm doing it on purpose." That was her favorite phrase, "not on purpose," even when it was glaringly obvious that everything she did was deliberate. The next week, it got worse. She started leaving her car right in front of my driveway overnight, and when I confronted her again, she accused me of being too uptight. Then she started involving the HOA, claiming that my driveway was too wide and confusing the property lines. I knew what she was doing. She was trying to twist the rules to justify her behavior, but I wasn't about to let her rewrite reality. One Friday evening, I came home exhausted, only to find her SUV not just blocking part of my driveway, but fully parked across it. I couldn't get in at all. I called her phone, no answer. I knocked on her door, no answer. So I parked on the street and spent the night fuming. The next morning, I decided I wasn't going to play her game anymore. If she wanted to block my driveway, then I'd give her a taste of her own medicine. The following weekend, I saw my chance. Karen had parked her SUV across part of my driveway again, but this time, I parked my truck directly behind her, leaving just enough space for me to get out, but making sure she was completely boxed in. I wasn't on her property. I was squarely within my own. Hours later, I heard her banging on my door. "Move your truck right now. You're blocking me in," she screamed. I calmly pointed out that she was the one blocking my driveway in the first place, and that my truck was legally parked on my property. She turned red, sputtered, and stormed off. I thought she'd cool off, but of course, Karen wasn't the type to let things go. 15 minutes later, a police car pulled up. She had actually called the cops on me, claiming that I was illegally blocking her vehicle. I stepped outside, and the officers asked for my side of the story. I explained everything: how she'd been blocking my driveway for weeks, how I had asked her repeatedly to stop, and how my truck was entirely on my own property. The officers looked at the property lines, checked the situation, and it didn't take them long to see the truth. Karen was furious when the cops told her she was in the wrong. She tried spinning excuses, saying that the driveway looked like common property, and that she had every right to use it. But the officers weren't buying it. They reminded her that trespassing on private property could lead to fines or even towing. One officer even suggested that if I wanted, I could file a complaint. Karen's face went pale. For the first time, she realized her little power play had backfired. After that day, things changed. Karen stopped blocking my driveway, but she didn't stop glaring at me whenever she had the chance. She muttered under her breath, spread rumors in the neighborhood, and even tried to rally the HOA against me. But the cops' involvement had left her reputation shaky. People began to see her for what she was, a bully who thought she was above the rules. And slowly, the community stopped siding with her. Looking back, I realized that standing up to her wasn't just about a driveway. It was about respect. Karen thought she could control everyone around her, that her title in the HOA gave her power over my property. But that day, she learned the hard way that property lines matter, the law matters, and neighbors can only push so far before people push back. My driveway may not seem like much, but it became a symbol of something bigger. The simple truth that no one has the right to walk all over you, no matter how loudly they shout or how many times they threaten to call the cops. Karen hasn't apologized, and I don't expect her to. But she hasn't blocked my driveway since, and honestly, that's all the peace I need. After the dust settled, life on my street took on a strange quiet. It wasn't the kind of peace you get when everything's normal. It was the uneasy silence that comes when someone knows they've lost control but refuses to admit it. Karen wasn't out front patrolling anymore. She wasn't blocking driveways, and she wasn't parading around with her clipboard like the sheriff of the neighborhood. But every time I stepped outside, I could feel her eyes on me, watching from behind her curtains. She wasn't used to being challenged, and now that she had been, it left a bruise on her pride she couldn't hide. What surprised me most was how many of my neighbors started approaching me after the incident. People I had barely spoken to before were suddenly stopping me on walks, quietly telling me they had their own run-ins with Karen. One woman admitted Karen had threatened to fine her for having too many flower pots on her porch. Another neighbor said she'd been scolded for leaving her Christmas lights up a week too long. Everyone had a story, and the more they shared, the more I realized Karen's bullying hadn't just been aimed at me. It had been spread across the whole block. I just happened to be the one who stood my ground first. Eventually, word of the police showing up spread around the community, and it shifted the way people saw Karen. Before, she carried herself as if she was untouchable, the loudest voice in every meeting, the enforcer of every petty rule. But now, she had been publicly corrected. People began speaking up in meetings where they used to stay silent. Homeowners started challenging her demands, asking for written rules, and even suggesting limits to her authority. For the first time in years, Karen's iron grip over the HOA started to crack, and she knew it. Of course, Karen didn't just roll over. She tried to make life difficult for me in quieter ways. Anonymous complaints about my trash cans suddenly appeared in HOA reports. A letter showed up about excessive noise when I hadn't even been home that day. She even tried to take pictures of my yard as evidence of violations that didn't exist. But the difference now was that no one took her seriously anymore. The police incident had stained her credibility, and instead of looking like a strong leader, she just looked desperate. Every time she tried to single me out, the rest of the community saw right through it. Through it all, I learned something about standing up for yourself. It's not always about winning in some dramatic way. It's about refusing to be walked on, even if it means uncomfortable confrontations. I could have ignored Karen forever, let her keep blocking my driveway, kept swallowing my frustration. But what kind of life would that be? Sometimes the smallest stand, like parking my truck on my own property, can set off a chain reaction that changes everything. My driveway was just the battlefield, but the real victory was proving that bullies back down when you refuse to move. Now, when I pull into my driveway, it feels different. It feels like mine, truly mine. not something I have to fight for anymore. Karen still lives there, still peeks through her blinds, still clings to whatever scraps of authority she has left. But she no longer controls me, and she no longer controls this neighborhood. The day she called the cops, she thought she was going to teach me a lesson, but in the end, it was her lesson to learn. Property lines matter. Respect matters. And no matter how much someone shouts, manipulates, or threatens, the truth always stands taller than their ego. That's something Karen can never block. Even now, long after the shouting has stopped and the cops have come and gone, I still think about what that moment meant. It wasn't just about winning an argument with a difficult neighbor. It was about reclaiming my peace of mind. When you buy a home, you expect it to be your safe place, your sanctuary, a space where you shouldn't have to look over your shoulder every time you park your car. For months, Karen had robbed me of that feeling. Every blocked driveway, every smug smirk, every fake apology. It was all designed to make me feel like a guest in my own house. Taking a stand put an end to that, and I'll never take that peace for granted again. What's even more surprising is how the neighborhood itself started to change after everything unfolded. People who once whispered complaints behind closed doors began speaking openly. We started waving to each other more often, sharing knowing glances when Karen marched around with her clipboard, and even laughing about her antics instead of being intimidated by them. That shift in energy was powerful. For the first time, it felt like the block belonged to all of us, not just to the loudest person in the room. We learned that community doesn't come from one person barking orders. It comes from people standing together, even quietly, against unfairness. As for Karen, the change in her was noticeable too. She stopped showing up at HOA meetings with the same confidence. The fire in her voice dimmed, and she began skipping entire gatherings altogether. When she did appear, she was quieter, more defensive, less eager to pick fights. It was like watching a queen stripped of her crown, still trying to hold her head high, but unable to command the room like before. Some neighbors pitied her. Others felt it was justice served. Me, I just saw someone who finally ran into a wall she couldn't push past, and that wall was the truth. Standing up to Karen taught me something about life that goes far beyond property lines and driveways. It reminded me that bullies don't disappear when school ends. They just grow older, buy bigger houses, and find new ways to push people around. But just like when we were kids, the way to stop a bully isn't to fight louder. It's to stand firm, hold your ground, and refuse to be moved. Sometimes the world doesn't need fireworks or grand victories. Sometimes it just needs someone willing to say, "Enough." And when you do, others find the courage to say it too. So now, when I walk out my front door, I don't see just a driveway, or a patch of concrete, or a simple place to park my truck. I see a reminder of the day I chose peace over frustration, strength over silence, and respect over fear. Karen may never admit she was wrong, and she may never apologize, but that doesn't matter anymore. Because I know, deep down, she learned her lesson the hard way. My home is mine. My driveway is mine. And my life, well, that belongs to me, not to the whims of an overbearing neighbor. At the end of the day, that's what freedom looks like. The quiet, steady confidence that no matter who tries to block your path, they can never take away what's rightfully yours. The weeks after the dust finally settled felt almost cinematic, the kind of slow, steady calm that lets you notice the small, honest things you'd stop seeing when you were wrapped up in the fight. On Saturday mornings, I'd sip coffee on the porch and watch neighbors tending their yards, children biking past, and mail carriers doing their rounds, all of it moving at a rhythm that no clipboard could command. There were still a few awkward moments. Karen would shuffle past with her head down, a stiff smile that never reached her eyes. But mostly there was a new courtesy in the air. People began inviting each other over for backyard barbecues and impromptu help with small repairs. It was as if the neighborhood collectively decided to breathe out after holding its breath for too long. I thought a lot during those quiet hours about what real community means. It isn't a set of rules enforced by the loudest voice, but the network of tiny favors, mutual respect, and small mercies that hold a place together. When I parked my truck at the end of the day and shut the garage, I felt a calm that was earned, not given. A calm that made every minor annoyance of the past seem like a tuition fee for a lesson I'd rather not have paid, but am grateful I learned. Looking back across the months that followed, the thing that stayed with me most wasn't the confrontation, the cop's visit, or Karen's sputtering complaints. It was the quiet, steady rebuilding of trust between neighbors who had been too polite to say what was bothering them until someone finally did. I watched friendships form in small ways, a shared ladder for gutter repairs, a pot of soup left on a doorstep after surgery, a teenager mowing a neighbor's lawn for pocket money. Those little acts felt like stitches mending a frayed fabric, and in private moments, when doubt crept in, wondering if I had been too proud or too stubborn, I reminded myself that courage is often boring, a routine of showing up, speaking plainly, and protecting the ordinary rights that let life hum along. If anything, the whole episode taught me to value everyday sovereignty, the right to park your car, to enjoy your porch, to live without being policed by someone else's insecurity. That sense of ownership is quieter than victory parades, but it's deeper. It lives in long breakfasts, in the unremarkable act of coming home, and in the knowledge that when push came to shove, I chose my peace and my neighbors chose civility. That, more than anything, is the scene I want the camera to hold for a long time before the credits roll. A driveway bathed in late afternoon light. A street where people wave, not because they're watching, but because they belong. In the end, what happened with Karen wasn't just another clash between neighbors. It was a glimpse into how fragile harmony can be, and how easily one person's need for control can ripple through an entire community. For months, her actions didn't just block my driveway. They blocked peace itself, casting a shadow over every small interaction on the block. But when the confrontation finally came, when the police stood there sorting truth from arrogance, something shifted. It wasn't a dramatic explosion that changed everything. It was a quiet correction, the kind that spread slowly, like sunlight creeping over frost until the chill recedes. That moment proved that even the smallest stance, something as ordinary as insisting your own driveway is your own, can restore balance where it's been lost. And in that restoration, I realized something powerful. Neighborhoods don't fall apart because of the loudest voice. They fray when everyone stays silent. All it takes is one person refusing to bend to rebuild the threads, to remind others of what fairness looks like. That's what stuck with me, long after the shouting ended. I don't know how long I'll live here, or how long Karen will linger behind those curtains, clutching her clipboard like a relic from a battle she already lost. Maybe she'll eventually move away. Maybe she'll stay forever, shrinking into the background of the street she once tried to control. But what I do know is that the lesson I carried from this fight will stay with me no matter where I go. Boundaries are not just lines on property maps. They're the invisible guardrails that allow us to live side by side without stepping on each other's dignity. When those boundaries are ignored, respect collapses. And respect, once broken, is far harder to rebuild than any cracked driveway or crooked fence. I used to believe strength was measured by volume, by who could argue louder, threaten harder, or demand more. Now I see it's measured in patience, in the calm refusal to surrender what's rightfully yours, in the ability to stand still when someone tries to shove you aside. True strength isn't the slam of a gavel or the flash of authority. It's the steady voice that says, No, this is mine, and I won't let you take it. That realization, more than the victory itself, is what changed me. So as this story comes to its close, I invite you to picture one last image. A driveway in the quiet glow of evening. There are no cars blocking it now. No raised voices cutting through the air. No cops sorting out the mess. It's just a strip of concrete, simple and ordinary, yet holding the weight of everything that was fought for. To anyone else, it's unremarkable, but to me, it's a reminder that peace is often hidden in the smallest places. Behind her curtain, Karen may still peek out, her life tangled in the silence she cannot control, her world smaller now that her grip has slipped. But that is no longer my concern. My driveway is clear, my home is whole, and my life belongs to me, not to the insecurities of an overbearing neighbor, not to the whispers of an HOA title, not to anyone but myself. That's the quiet victory I carry. The steady assurance that no matter who tries to block your path, they cannot take away what is rightfully yours. The story ends not with anger, not with gloating, but with the calm knowledge that sometimes the greatest battles are won not with fists or fury, but with the unshakable choice to hold your ground and live in peace.